Okay, we're going to continue Unit 7, uh, Lesson 7.3. This is going to be pretty quick. Uh, what we're going to do is we're going to start looking at finding solutions to quadratic equations now using algebra. So the very first way we're going to do that is just by thinking about how many solutions do we think there will be. Okay, so let's look at number one. And number one is asking us if we have x squared and it's equal to 9, what number or numbers can I put in for x where I could square them and get 9? Well, I think we all are pretty aware that if I take 3 and I square 3, 3 times 3 is 9, right? I think we can all agree with that. But one that many students overlook is negative 3. If I square negative 3, negative 3 times negative 3, which is what squaring is, remember our little triangle here, right? A negative times a negative is going to equal a positive. So this is also positive 9. So notice for number one, we have two solutions, which is really going to be the most likely case for almost all quadratics. Okay, so I'm just using number one here as an example of the thought that goes into this. And then we'll go through and I'll show you how to solve these using algebra. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this. Okay, number one here, we're going to solve by using square roots. Okay, we're going to solve by using square roots. And to do that, we're going to need a graphing calculator or a calculator of some kind. So I'm going to pull up my graphing calculator on the computer here so that I can show you the keystrokes that you can use. There's a box of calculators at the front of the room. Feel free to grab one of the calculators so that you can use it and get used to going through the keystrokes here as you take notes, because this is going to be kind of important. So here's my graphing calculator. Let me get out of this window and let me clear. And so we just see our graphing calculator here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve this equation by taking square roots. And the key here, when you are solving by taking square roots, to solve by using square root, the key is to get something squared, something by itself squared, and have it equal a number. Okay, that's the key. That's what we're trying to do. After we do that, step number two, we're going to do, let me make this pen a little smaller. Step number two, we are going to use square roots. And then step number three, we're going to break it up if necessary. And you'll see step number three a little bit later on down the page here. So if we go back here to number one, we want to solve this equation. Notice I have something squared. I have this x squared by itself, and it's equal to just a number. It's equal to just 9. And I'm going to solve this by taking square roots. So what I do, since I have something squared equal a number, is I take the square root of both sides. Okay? Just like when you add a number to both sides or subtract a number from both sides or multiply both sides or divide from both sides, you do what you do on one side, you have to do on the other. And the reason I'm taking this square root is because that square root is the inverse of squaring. So it undoes squaring. So I'm left on the left-hand side with just an x. And then on the right-hand side, we have to think, what's the square root of 9? So here's where I can use my calculator. And again, I know you guys know what the square root of 9 is, but I'm just going to type it in here to show you how to type it in. To get to the square root button, what you need to do is you need to hit the second button. Notice the cursor on my screen turns to an up arrow. It's like a shift key. And the second function of the squared key here we see is square root. So if I hit second and then the squared key, that gives me square root, and I just put the number that I'm taking the square root of, 9, hit enter, and it tells me it is indeed 3. So now I have x is equal to 3, but remember, it's both positive and negative 3. Okay, so I have two answers here. I have x is equal to negative 3, and I also have x is equal to positive 3. I have two separate answers. If you wanted to leave it just like this, x equals plus or minus 3, that is totally fine. That's good notation, and I will accept that. Or you can write the two separate answers, x equals negative 3, x equals positive 3. Now let's take a look at number 2. I again have something squared by itself, and it's equal a number, right? That number happens to be 0. But I solve it the same way. I got something squared by itself. I need to get rid of that squared, so I'm going to take the square root of both sides because that square root cancels the squared. And I'm left with x is equal to, I got to figure out what's the square root of 0. What number do I multiply by itself to get 0? I do the same thing. Go to the calculator to check, just want to make sure. And in fact, x is equal to 0 in this instance. Now notice, I don't have to put both positive and negative 0 because 0 is neither positive nor negative. So that is the final answer to number 2. Number 3 looks a little bit different, but we go through the same motions. I need to get something squared by itself equals a number. Well, my something squared over here on the left has a subtract 1. I need to get rid of that subtract 1, and I do that by adding 1 to both sides first. These ones on the left cancel, and I'm left with x squared is equal to 3 plus 1 is 4. Now I have something squared by itself equals a number. I take the square root of both sides because this square root cancels that squared, and I'm left with x equals, go to the calculator, find what is the square root of 4. It's 2. I have to remember it's both positive and negative 2. There are my two answers. I got two answers. Number 4, very similar to all the other ones, right? So what I need to do is get something squared by itself. I have the x squared, but there's a 2 stuck over there with it. That 2 is being multiplied. I undo multiplication with division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2, canceling the 2's on the left. The left-hand side, I'm left with x squared. And on the right-hand side, 50 divided by 2 is 25. Now I have something squared equals 25. I got to get the x by itself, so I need to cancel that squared with the square root. X is equal to, now I take the square root of 25, second x squared, put in the 25. I'm taking the square root of 25. It's 5. My final answer, my final answer, sorry about that, is both positive and negative 5. I have two solutions, positive 5 and negative 5. Number 5, we're going to do the same thing. We got to get something squared by itself. I see that there's a 12 stuck over there. It's stuck with addition. I unstick addition with subtraction, so I'm going to subtract 12 from both sides. Those 12s cancel. I end up with something squared, x squared, is equal to 13 minus 12 is 1. I undo squaring by taking the square root. Undo squared by taking square root. I got the x by itself. The square root of 1 we know is 1, so remember both positive and negative roots when we solve equations. And there are my two answers, both positive and negative 1. Number 6 looks a little bit more difficult, but it's really not. It's pretty much the same. So I need to get something squared by itself. Well, I have a 3 over here. I also have a 5. The 3 is being multiplied by x squared. The 5 is being subtracted. I need to get rid of that subtraction first, so I'm going to add 5 to both sides. And that adding 5 gets rid of the subtract 5 on the left. On the left-hand side, I'm left with 3x squared is equal to 43 plus 5 is 48. Now, I don't quite have something squared by itself yet because there's still a 3 over here. That 3 is being multiplied, so I'm going to divide both sides by 3. This divide by 3 cancels the multiply by 3 on the left, and I'm left with x squared. 48 divided by 3 is 16. Let me check my arithmetic. I'm pretty sure. 48 divided by 3 is in fact 16. Now I have something squared is equal a number. I get rid of the squared by taking the square root both sides. That squared cancels that square root cancels the squared. I'm left with x is equal to square root of 16. Is 4. My final answers are both positive and negative 4. So that's it for the first video, solving by taking square roots. Okay? And it's really that simple. You just go through the same steps over and over and over again, and you'll get your answers. What I'd like you guys to do is make sure you got these notes copied down, and then the next video will be coming up shortly.